Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our celebration of International Women's Day and for our screening of Odyssey Impact and Transform Films' Stranger Sister, a story of two women of faith, one Muslim and one Jewish, building bridges to overcome hate. I'd like to start this event with a land acknowledgement. Tanenbaum's offices currently sit on recognized Munsee Lenape land in Manhattan. And so we'd like to just take a moment of silence in acknowledgement of the lands and the ancestors where we currently reside and ask that they would look favorably upon this gathering. Thank you so much. Everyone should have received a pre-screening survey. And if you've not had a chance to fill this survey out, the link is being dropped into the chat now. Please take a moment and fill this out for our partners at Odyssey Impact. They greatly appreciate the feedback that we can give them. And a little bit about our agenda for today. So the film itself is approximately 40 minutes long. After the film, we'll be joined by the co-founders of the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom, Sheryl Olitzky and Atiya Aftab, discussing the Sisterhood's theory of contact and sharing tips for others looking to host conversations within their own communities. The last 10 to 15 minutes of our time together will be held for questions from the audience. And so now, without further ado, I present to you Stranger Sister. Such a powerful documentary movie film. I'd like to ask our founders from the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom, if you would turn on your cameras and microphones. Sheryl and Atiya, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Sheryl, how are you?
Good.
I'm trying to actually kind of get it together here. This is probably the third time I've seen the film, and each time it just moves me in such a way. I actually reached into my pocket to pull out my handkerchief in case I should fall apart during this interview. And I see that Atiya is having some difficulty turning on her video, and there she is.
I've had
Hello,
technical problems all morning today, but good to see everyone here.
Good to see you both. So, oh my goodness, I gotta get it together here. I should have.
I cry every time. It's crazy. I just do. It's so emotional.
I probably should have watched it this morning to prepare myself, but I kind of forgot how moving this story is, and I believe it will probably be one of those iconic stories that will last for quite some time. So I'd just like to welcome back all of our guests. Let me just first say a word that this event is actually launching an activity that we're creating at Tanenbaum as one of our 30th anniversary celebrations called 3,000 Conversations to Build Respect for Religious Difference. And, over the last 30 years at Tanenbaum, we've certainly seen the value of people within and across the Tanenbaum community having intentional conversations around building respect for religious difference and building respect for difference in particular, and the impact that that can have on individuals and their communities. So it's just such an honor to have both of you with us. And the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom is very clearly just this shining example about building trust, building respect, building relationships, and starting a movement from a dining room, which is where they often happen, I'm told.
It's true.
So thank you both for joining me today. Just a quick word, because we do have a fuller bio on the website in one of our blog posts, but Atiya, co-founder of the Sisterhood, an attorney, educator, activists, and we don't even have all of your personal, like mom, like we don't have all of that in here as well. So, but maintaining your own practice, providing a lot of representation to nonprofits, a current adjunct professor at Rutgers, chair of the Center for Islamic Life for Rutgers, convener of the first full-time Muslim chaplaincy on the campus, a leader in your faith community, serving as a member of the Islamic Society of Central Jersey's board for over 20 years. And I'd love to have a board member like that. And Sheryl, other co-founder of the Sisterhood as well, founding executive director, prior to founding the Sisterhood, working as a marketing executive, building skills around strong leadership and relationship, and this intense passion to rid the world of hate, not just to abide by it, but like to get rid of it, to make it no more. And right now a sought after presenter, teaching communities about interfaith relationship building, presenting on the power of women in interfaith dialogue, and leading Building Bridges trips to locations of significant interest to Muslims and Jews. And I understand you are in Israel right now.
Yes, I am.
We used to say years ago, simulcast from, but now it's live through Zoom, joining us from Israel. So I just appreciate you both just making yourselves available for this conversation today. And is there anything that you want to say to the people out there in Zoom land?
I
I
miss Sheryl. I haven't seen her in a long time, so I miss her.
I miss you, Atiya, and the only message, the main message I want to convey is I just walked out of a program where I heard a rabbi speak whose father is Russian, her mother's Ukrainian.
Mm-hmm.
She serves a congregation made up of Ukrainians and Russians. And her message is one that applies to everything Atiya and I have been doing for almost 15 years now. And that is, we are all children of one God. And fighting and killing doesn't just hurt one, it hurts all. So if we could just always remember we are all from one God, and just join me in a prayer that we will see a rapid end to what is happening. It touches all of us, and praying for peace.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sheryl. Thank you so much. Atiya, anything from you?
No, I'm just, happy to be here. And, obviously within the whole, context of what's going on in the world, what's going on in our country. And I'm just really happy that Tanenbaum's given us a platform to have this discussion, and that the challenges that we have had in the sisterhood, the successes that we have in the sisterhood, can be replicated by every single person. And that's, I think, what distinguishes our organization as a grassroots organization from many other interfaith type of organizations. And I'm just really happy, to speak to the community about that.
Mark, can I just share one thing?
Our
theory of change is contact effects and extended contact effects. And if I may, very quickly, contact effects means that if you bring two people together who are different in any way, for us, I'm Jewish, Atiya's Muslim, we came together, and you give them a chance to meet in a safe and brave space, to meet because they're sharing the same objective, and to meet frequently, they will forge trust, respect, and love amongst each other. And this is the most important point. The way they feel about each other is how they will feel about each other's communities. And that's how we stop hate. But let me take it to the next step, which is extended contact effects, which is everyone, thank you so much, who is on and viewed the film and is joining us now. Extended contact effects means that just the fact that you are hearing about Muslims and Jews coming together to fight hate, you are changing your perception of Muslims, you're changing your perception of Jews, and you will influence others. So thank you all for being here, because by being part of tonight, or this afternoon for you in the States, you are doing your part just by listening with your hearts and watching to change the face of hate.
That was so powerful, Sheryl. Thank you so much, because I think that really lies at the heart of one of the reasons why we started these 3,000 conversations to build respect for religious difference, because I do believe, and this is the piece that I don't think people talk about enough in contact theory. It's not just that you meet people, but you meet them frequently. And that is markedly different than the ways, and most times we talk about contact theory. It's almost as if I show up at the iftar dinner, if I show up at Passover Seder, I've had contact, and now I've been transformed. And it's harder work than that. So thank you for laying that out, because I think that's crystal clear, and it applies certainly to all of the audiences we generally work with at Tanenbaum. I'd like to ask you all, we were talking yesterday, Atiya and I, about how your individual background and your faith informed this relationship that you built first between each other and then became the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom. Because, we all have things that motivate us, but most people don't go out and start a not-for-profit that spreads across the land and then spreads across the world. So everybody doesn't quite get to that point. So I think we'd all love to know a little bit about how your individual backgrounds and your own faith journey informed the relationship building that you all do.
Tia, do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Sheryl.
Okay. Several things happened along my journey to get me to this space. And it was all part of growing, but I am an observant Jew. I observe all the holidays, I observe the Sabbath, and my Judaism guides my life. It just so happens that my husband is a rabbi, both my sons are rabbis, and there is one commandment in the Torah that is mentioned more than any other commandment. In fact, some will say 36 times, some will say more than 36 times, and that is to protect the stranger. We were all strangers when we left Egypt. And it's that notion of protecting the stranger that has shaped my life from the time I was very young to the time right now when I'm a grandmother. And I mentioned there were three things. The last of the three things that really said to me, aha, this is my moment when I need to make a change, was when I was in Poland and heard a horrible statement toward anyone who was otherized, and especially toward Muslims. And it was at that point where I said, and you heard it in the movie, you heard me talk about it, I have to protect the stranger because I was a stranger. And if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And so it was my deep belief in my faith that guides me and guided me to help me find Atiya.
Yeah, and I think that, everything happens because we're people of faith. Everything happens at a right time and for a reason. And my background before I met Sheryl was a person who everyone would ask, look at my name, they'd be like, oh, where are you from? What's your background? And when someone says that, depending on the tone, and when I was growing up, the tone was, you don't belong here. Who are you? And that was in many spaces. It happened not just in spaces at large, but even within my own religious community, because I didn't fit in a particular box. Being half Indian, half English, being Muslim, being an immigrant, I wasn't born in this country. And so, there was always this sense of where did I belong to? And also feeling that, did I belong? So I think I came with some baggage, and that maybe some of it was apparent to me, some of it I think very implicit. So when, and my experience, as an attorney, as someone who's been active with the Muslim community, with interfaith, it was not really the best experience. So I think when Sheryl reached out to me, at the time she reached out to me, it was just meant to be that we said, you know what, we're going to try something different. We're going to put together just a small group of women. It all starts with just that kind of one decision to just say, let's try this. And for me to say, Sheryl extended her hand and I accepted that hand. And I also, as a woman of faith, believe that was my responsibility to do that. There's a verse in the Quran where God states that, we believe that God states that God created humanity in nations and tribes, not so that you despise one another, but so you get to know one another. And that to me is the essence. We were meant to be different, and we are meant to get to know one another. So when Sheryl reached out to me, it was, despite my work responsibilities, family commitments, I had to take her hand. We connected immediately and we said, you know what, let's do something different. Let's take this out of our religious institutions. Let's open up our homes. Let's open up ourselves. Let's take that risk of trusting each other. Let's take that risk of getting to know one another, being curious. And I can tell you it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. And we're on, as Sheryl said, on this journey 10 plus years now.
And Mark, I was going to say, I'm in Haifa, which does give me hope in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because I would say Haifa is now at a state of coexistence. They're not at shared society yet, but the most diverse area of Israel. And I've been meeting with all these people, with Christian Arabs and Muslim Arabs and Druze and Jews of all beliefs. And what they keep saying is, well, it's great. We're doing great stuff here. We're bringing together imams and rabbis and fathers and priests. And that's great. They're doing it. And I'm trying to be assertive, not aggressive, and say, but it's grassroots. You want to make it happen. Get down to the individual people, get down to the mamas and the grandmas and the aunties and the sisters, but get down to the most common person, because it's person to person. It's bottom up as opposed to top down. The top down helps.
Yes.
But how have we been able to literally change the course of hate and change the world? It's been from the bottom up, person to person, in our case, woman to woman.
And it's so powerful that from what both of you have shared, because I just hear so many resonances, certainly to the work of our Peacemakers in Action Network, identifying these grassroots, religiously motivated peace activists working in conflict zones and or post-conflict zones. But it's very, very clear that even if we look at, laws that have been enacted around equal rights, et cetera, that didn't necessarily change the hearts and the minds of the people who you would expect to follow them, because they are the law. And there is this opportunity for the content experience and the expanded content experience, without which our hopes for shared equity and existence are hopes. They're not plans. So powerful. So let me ask, so this is International Women's Day. And as women of faith, what would you say are your biggest takeaways from hosting conversations that centered around prioritizing the voices of women? Because we also know from peace building theory that if you want to transform a society, support women, build women, strengthen women's lives and their roles. So how would you say that by prioritizing the voices of women in conversations, it actually differs from conversations in other spaces?
You heard in the movie when I quoted my husband from, women are from one planet, men are from another planet. Mm-hmm. The way I explain it, Mark, is that, and please, this is not a judgment on men or women in any way. Our brains are wired differently. Women navigate the world through relationships. When they get together, they will focus on building relationships first, to build that trust, to build that love. Then they will move into differences. And at that point, God willing, they could respect those differences. And this comes from neuroscience. Men navigate the world through rules, through regulations, through order. And men tend to, let's just jump into, I'm right, you're wrong, here's the path we should be going. Women take a very different approach. When Atiya and I met and we said we have to do something to change these negative stereotypes, to stop the hate, how can we do this faster than anything else? It's bring the women together. So that's number one, a different wiring in our brains. Number two is women will do anything. It's the mama bear theory. They will do anything to protect their cubs. And in our case, it's to protect our cubs from hate, from negative stereotypes. And then the third thing is, you know, being an observant Muslim or an observant Jewish woman, however you define observant, is not easy. I like to say I am a feminist and I am as open as possible. My husband supports feminism. And that being said, there are challenges that I face as a woman of faith and that Atiya faces as a woman of faith that men don't have to face. Whether it's what I have to do to prepare for holidays, which are endless, whether it's making sure our dietary laws are practiced and our children are getting back and forth, are following religious education. It's not easy. And for the most part, the men in my faith group, and Atiya, I'm speaking for you, don't have to follow those issues. So this notion that we understand the challenges and we could work together to solve these challenges is something that most of our male counterparts did not understand. And to this day, I think don't totally understand it. Atiya?
Yeah, I to echo some of those points, I think the reality is, our reality is that we have challenges in male-dominated spaces, particularly in our religious institutions. And that is just simply the number one challenge. So, I think that, when you're within that structure, it's very hard to change the structure. So, and I'm not saying I'm on the board of my mosque. I'm working on that too. But, we didn't want that to be a barrier for us. And it's a very different situation when we got together, Sheryl and I, our first chapter, the many, many chapters that have come since then, where we are in a personal home space, right? And we're, and to me, that is like the bravest of all spaces, that we've created to have these kinds of conversations, because you know what? I really believe that people are itching to have these conversations. It's very difficult to have these conversations in a work environment. It is very difficult to have these conversations in any really other environment, except for an environment that is intentionally created to ask some difficult questions, to actually open up your heart and open up your, what you're thinking on something, that you're not being seen as offending somebody. And I remember in many of our early meetings asking some very basic questions. Well, how do you do that? Why do you do that? What's the meaning behind this? These are not normal questions that you can ask in other environments. And also that willingness to say, hey, I'm here to share what my beliefs are and how I'm trying to live those beliefs, the challenges that I have in trying to live those beliefs. As Sheryl said, dietary restrictions, in the fact that, not restrictions, but the challenges that we have, that our holidays are not the same holidays as everybody else. We are starting our month of Ramadan, God willing, on April 2nd. The rest of the world is just going through, what goes on in the spring. And,
Right.
I have to constantly say, listen, I'm not sure this is a good time to have a meeting because I'm fasting. I'll be breaking fast at that time. And that puts me in a difficult position from a work perspective.
Yeah.
And we have to carry that, right? Sheryl and I have to carry that as minorities.
I really appreciate, the takeaway that I'm experiencing from this conversation and from this sharing is that the trust that was built and is building ongoingly is attended to. And it's attended to by people who first took the time to know one another. And I would venture to say that even in those shared experiences, making room for the diversity, that people were managing those shared experiences and not kind of adding any judgment to, oh, well, your husband does that, well, good for you. But, like there's gotta be kind of like, that pantheon of experiences, but making room for everyone to authentically share those experiences. As you know, we have a membership program. We have a number, almost 60 global corporations in our network.
We lost you, Mark.
Oh, am I back?
You're back.
Yeah, I have you. You're there.
Okay. I was just saying that, we have in our membership program, we have over 60 global corporations who are working actively on creating policies and building, safe spaces for employees of all faiths and none. And many of their employee resource groups engage in conversations about exploring those differences. And trust is one of those things that comes up, like, how do you build that? And, we talked yesterday about this whole idea of trust not necessarily being earned, but being like, you get it kind of automatically. And then if you do something that breaks it, the quest becomes trying to get back to that place where you trust the other person. And it sounds very clear that that is something that you all attend to on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And again, I had mentioned this to you, Mark, before, but this idea of, the tradition in Islam of give your brother or sister, 70 excuses. In other words, trust is the assumption, right? Assume everyone has good intent, unless something happens where that's not the case. And so I think that when you start at 100%, you're coming at things with a different attitude. You're coming at the meetings with a sense of hope. You're acting out of good faith. It's all like the positive rather than the suspicion, right? Because the suspicion, you're starting out at maybe 0 or 5%. And then you don't want to look at it that way, that you're building, but I think we want to look at it as like we are curious about each other. We want to get to know one another. We are excited to know something different. And if I could just add, Mark, these challenges are also intra-faith. Sheryl and I go through this all the time. I represent myself as a Muslim. There are Muslims who have 1.6 billion of them who practice in different ways, look different. And that's something that we've also learned, I think, in our gatherings, right? Sheryl is not the only example of a Jewish woman. So, and I'm not the only example of a Muslim woman, but it's about how do we live our faith?
The other thing I was going to say, Mark, you mentioned the differences and the trust around it. What we really strive to help our members to understand is it's really easy to celebrate the commonalities, but it's the differences that build that trust and respect and that allow us to learn more about ourselves and more about each other. So instead of saying we come together to celebrate our commonalities, let's turn it over and say we come together to celebrate our differences.
Yep, and learn our commonalities in order to celebrate our differences.
Exactly.
That's so powerful. I just want to say that again, because that's so powerful, that we come together to understand. Did you say understand? You didn't say understand.
Learn our commonalities.
Learn
right?
our commonalities so that we can celebrate our differences.
Differences, exactly.
That's powerful. That's the quote of the day for me. I love it. I love that. So let me ask this question, and then we want to make some time for people to ask questions as well. So the sisterhood, you have organically and really purposefully built this inclusive community over these past, is it 15 years now? I've heard 12 or
almost 15.
Almost 15 years. So what were some of the unforeseen challenges that you had to overcome to kind of create this this really fulfilling and very brave space. It's, especially in the beginning, because our hope is that people who listen to this interview will really take on this idea of having some kind of conversation that builds respect for religious difference. So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Do you want me to go or you want to go?
Go ahead. We're taking turns.
Look, I came into this, Mark, so excited and ready to go. I thought everyone would be excited. I didn't anticipate that I would have Jewish sisters going after me and not supporting it and changing our relationships because of it. So those were early challenges. And the other thing, and we learned so much along the path, a challenge was recruitment. We're grassroots. For the first 3 years, I was the only employee. Then we added a few part-time. This organization is based on volunteers. And appreciating the volunteers and how do you keep volunteers motivated, but yet they're not employees, and how do you get the most out of them? That's not easy. And it's volunteers who are overseeing chapters. So how do you ensure that a chapter is diverse enough to reflect each faith community, but similar enough so that you have the intimacy in the chapter meetings? And when we had 20 chapters, Atiya and I knew everyone. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden we got to 50, and all of a sudden we were at 150 and more, and we don't. So you're counting on the volunteers to be able to do that. That's a challenge. And then you've got some of the things that I'm sure are very obvious. You've got funding challenges that everyone faces. You've got the challenges every time there is, God forbid, but it happens, something happening with Israel and Palestine. That creates challenges, and you hope that you've taught the skills, and we continue to try to teach the skills about how to listen with your heart, not your ears, and move forward. But those to me, Atiya, were the biggest challenges that I personally faced as the director.
Yeah, again, I don't want to take too much time just to echo, but absolutely the nuances of the interfaith issues of our fellow, members of our faith saying, hey, what are you doing? Why are you involved in this? But then really, as Sheryl outlined, really our biggest challenges have been operational challenges, the funding, the employees, the kind of the boring stuff. We grew so rapidly during the lead up till the Trump election. And we grew at a proportion that it was hard for us to keep up with the resources to support. So I think that really, what the things that Sheryl mentioned, obviously Israel-Palestine is always a challenge as well, but I agree, those are the three biggest challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because it is, interestingly enough, right, it wasn't the mission that was difficult. No. It was like,
that's the easy part.
We need 50 chairs. Who's going to get those?
Yep.
Right.
It's all of the nuts and bolts. So I want to ask this question, and then I want to kind of open it up to people as well. So, both of our organizations are really committed to the process of dialogue, of building bridges, of having people understand one another. We have, lots of resources. I'm curious if you'd like to, from all of the conversations that have been hosted, what are some of the tips and resources that you would want to pass on, or maybe what's the one or two things you want people to remember if they were to start having conversations like this in their communities?
I'll give you a few of the real fundamentals that we focus on. The first is to get out of your comfort zone. Go out and find someone who is different than you in any way, shape, or form, and ask for their story. I'm surrounded in Israel. Let me tell you the facts. These are the facts before 48. This is 48. And here's one set of facts. And then I talk to someone else and it's a totally different set of facts, but they both own those facts and they're right. Instead of, let me tell you my story. Let me tell you how my family got here, why they got here, and why this is so hard. Instead of focusing on facts, listen to one another. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about your story. Listen to their story and ask questions to further know their story. You know, when you share your story, no one can say it's not true. It's yours, you own it. And there is no better way to have empathy than to listen to someone's story. That's number one. Number two, close your ears, listen from here, listen from your heart. Number three, see the world through your brother and sister's eyes, not your eyes. And then finally, build it from the bottom up. And breaking bread together is the best way to build that from the bottom up. Those are the very basics. We have a covenant we ask people to sign when they come in. Basically, it's from, a lot of it's borrowed from the Dialogue Institute at Temple and Leonard Swidler, and there's so much, it's all the common stuff, Mark, that we all share. But what I just shared are the very basics of how to make it work.
Thank you so much. Tia, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of resources on our website, sosspeace.org, which you could put in the chat, as well as the Odyssey. It's in the chat right now. There's a lot of those, resources. But, as I put in the chat, number one is to be curious. Number one is to be open and willing to learn and listen. And I do think, and I said this in the film, because it reminded me, so just seeing the film again, there are also challenges of this, we can tell stories, and that's always, I think I absolutely agree with that and believe in that. But until we hear each other's stories, I think we can get to another level after that as well. I think telling the stories is the start. And then together, in a together journey, I think you can go further. And that's something that I said in the film.
Can I add one thing, Mark?
Please.
If we could get rid of a few words from our vocabulary, get rid of tolerance. Tolerance is not a positive. It used to be people said, let's aim for coexistence. I don't want to coexist. I want to share my life with people so everyone has the same equality, the same freedom, the same goals, and we're fulfilling those goals together. So a shared society as opposed to coexistence. And finally, let's get rid of the word other and call it another.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
completely with you around tolerance. That has been, we actually, the only reason the word tolerance is on our website at all is so that people can find us.
Yeah,
because without it, people don't go looking for building respect for religious difference.
Right.
And we've had that same conversation with Southern Poverty Law Center. You've had it, you get it. But when we're talking to others, and for those that are on, hopefully you're ready to be curious and go out there and do it. Here's the real hot buttons to focus on.
And going back to that breaking bread together, I think that was, again, the fundamental about opening your home. Have someone come in, meet, and you can't hide. You're in your home. They're looking around. They're seeing, how do you live? You're opening your heart. You're opening your home. And I have to say, Sheryl, even breaking bread sometimes can be a challenge when you have dietary restrictions. I remember quizzing you. Remember the first time you came over? I don't want to offend. I want to make sure that everything is okay, that we can actually physically break bread together. But those are great learning experiences, right? And should not be looked at as problematic. You know what? You can eat pork. I'm not going to eat pork. You can eat but we have to find ways that we can actually sit down and have those conversations over whether it's just a cup of coffee or a meal or whatever it is, because I think those are game changing, and they're life changing, quite frankly.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'm mindful of our time, but I'm also mindful that we probably need another conversation at some point about so that we can lift up your work for so many more people, because
We'll schedule a dinner party.
I would love that. I would love that. And I'm a great sous chef, so I can
Okay.
cook, but I'd rather just come and like help prepare.
That sounds good.
Got my own apron and everything. So, so we're going to open this up for questions now. We're going to ask everyone, if you have a question for Sheryl and Atiya, would you please drop them into the Q&A box. You'll find it in the navigation pane across the bottom of your screen, and happy to ask your questions. I'll say this, I did a training for high school students that were part of a New York Times Academy. And I had them do this activity where they walked around and said, I tolerate you, I tolerate you. And they had to get to as many people as they could. And then I said, okay, so now let's go with, I respect you. And then they did that and just had them share out about what was that experience like. And I never forget, one student talked about it felt forced because I probably wouldn't be as honest about tolerating people when I was actually forced to say it. And likewise, knowing that I have to do more to actually respect people than just say it. It was kind of like, okay, I'm going home now. Day's done. All the work is done. All right, so we're waiting on some questions from the audience, but I actually have another question while we're waiting on them. Let's just see. So, I think that, we're both organizations that you all teach behaviors of respect, and that is central to Tanenbaum's work. That you create environments where respect can actually happen and not just be spoken about, but it's actually the actions that people take. And you see how these purposeful conversations, the impact that they can have. We really want to encourage everyone to kind of step into their own conversations. So I'm curious to know, what are some of what are, I guess, maybe your most precious memories of the positive outcomes that you've seen that have come from the conversations that have been happening in the sisterhood over these almost 15 years?
Oh, there are so many stories that I would just love to share. Oh my gosh, where to be? Here's one of my most favorite stories. When the Tree of Life massacre happened, we had a teenage chapter, we still do, a teenage chapter in Pittsburgh. And two girls met each other. And please, this is not intended to be political when I explain this. And through their work in the sisterhood, they became leaders of their teenage chapter and started speaking out against hate. The massacre happened. They both lived in Squirrel Hill, one Muslim, one Jewish, and they heard that President Trump was coming to town. They, because of their commitment to the sisterhood, commitment to fighting hate, the young Muslim teenage girl whose heart was breaking for her Jewish sister, who belonged to Tree of Life Synagogue, helped to arrange a rally. And the two key speakers at the rally, speaking against hate and trying to prevent President Trump from coming to speak, were these two teenage girls from the Sisterhood of Salaam Shalom, and said to me, Sheryl, I never would have had the commitment to do this, nor the courage to get up and do it, had I not gained the love for each other in our chapter, and had I not gained the leadership skills from the sisterhood. That's just one incredible example of how we are fighting hate, how we are empowering women of all ages, and how we're creating leaders to change the world.
So powerful. I mean, I can really hear your theory of change, which is, I'm not just standing for this Jewish young person, I'm standing for my sister. And
Yes.
For her, these are the actions that we need to take. And maybe a little bit for me, but not so much. For her, and for what's important to her today. I do have a question. Has your movement migrated to brotherhood?
That's a great question. As you saw in the background, my husband walking in a few minutes ago, has it migrated to brothers? We get this question a lot, and I'll answer it several ways. Number one, my husband's name is Kerry. Our brother is Amar, Atiya's husband. And on a personal note, our families, all the women in our chapter, we are one family. The brothers are involved. They don't meet with us all the time, but boy, for personal visits together, for sharing together, for sharing the celebrations as well as the
holidays and life moments.
Holidays and the life cycle events, positive and negative, we are there together. There are 2 or 3 chapters whose husbands, fathers, boyfriends, sons wanted to do what we're doing, and so they did it on their own. But it has not been part of the sisterhood, but they're following the model. Honestly, we still have so much work to do in the sisterhood, and until we are at the point where we've got it done, I don't think there's room for us to move in that direction. And it's very different. Like I said, the wiring in our brains are very different, and the construct of what we do with the women in the sisterhood would be very different for what we would do with men. And we have always said, hey, if any of you brothers want to step up and take this on and be the leaders in this, we would welcome it. None have stepped up to do it nationally, let alone across North America, let alone internationally. We're still waiting.
But you know, you saw in the film, in the beginning of the film and the end of the film, when we were gathering right after the Trump ban, you know, my father was there, Carrie was there, my husband was there, my son was there. There were, you know, we can't do what we do without our family supporting us, male and female. So our men are there. You know, they may not be in the front, which is not where they're supposed to be. So let us be in the front, but we need supporters, and we need to bring our families into this, because, and it goes to that contact theory. Yes. You know, they're being affected by our actions, and I think that's great, but not in a formal way. But I would say, as Sheryl said, they are part of the sisterhood. Implicitly, yes. They're part of the sisterhood.
Yeah, I definitely, when the t-shirts get made, like, I want mine.
We will get you a t-shirt. We will get you a t-shirt.
And I think, you know, I remember that too, there are any number of moments that are compelling to me when I look at the documentary. One of them is in that meeting, that first meeting that's seen in the documentary, and you see the men on the circumference of the space. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that was so powerful that they could witness, like with the fullness of themselves, just witness, not interfere, not take over, not feel like they had to do anything, but just to bear witness to what was happening. I thought that was so, so powerful. And there's another moment where, the interview with Meg Kelly, I don't remember her name, like when you were talking about why it's just Muslim and Jewish women, that there's a rationale for this. And, you know, to what are multiple identities, we do a lot of work with intersectionality at Tanenbaum, as I'm sure you do. And, you know, something about, yes, as Muslim and Jewish women, we are members of minorities, but we actually are still dealing with being women in many patriarchal societies. And so that's another dimension of what we have to address in order to do the work that we want and need to do. And that doesn't mean that we're against men, but we need to kind of sanctify this space, if you will. And then, you know, the greatest compliment is imitation. So when you see men kind of creating brotherhoods or using the model, using the dynamic, that's probably one of the most powerful affirmations out there. So our time is running short. Let me just ask, what would you like to leave our audience with? given that we're hoping that people who watch this, whether they're watching live or watch the recording, will want to engage and have one of these 3,000 conversations for building respect for religious difference, what is your missive to them, or what would you like them to remember? What's the thing that you'd like for them to remember?
So we always, Sheryl and I always bring up this one verse from both of our religious texts, and that is, if you save one life, it's as if you save the world. And with that, I say take one step. All you need to do is take one step to get to know someone who may be of a different faith, a different race, different whatever, but just take that one step, and not only will you I think gain something, but the reverberation of that, I think, is just amazing. And it is from a spiritual perspective, if we all just took one step, I think that we could change the world. Absolutely.
Amen.
So, and Sheryl, I still remember years ago us meeting at Tanenbaum. I guess this probably was maybe 12 years ago or something along those lines. And so to just be with you all now and to have you just talking about the documentary, talking about you as people, your work, it has been such a joy and a privilege. And we're just so honored to have had the opportunity to share your work and share your story with our constituents. So thank you both so much for making this time available.
Thank you, Mark.
So much. This is wonderful. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the work you do to make this a better world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Sheryl. So we'll share more information out about the 3,000 conversations. You'll be seeing more information about that in a follow-up to this presentation. We will be sharing not the documentary itself, but this conversation on our YouTube channel. So that will be available shortly. And if you are pleased with the work and would like to let other people know about it, please share. We are a Tanenbaum Center on all social media platforms. What are your social media handles? Is it SOSS?
SOSSpeace.org.
SOSSpeace.org. And then we have, this is our 30th anniversary, as I mentioned earlier, on March 23rd, we're going to be doing an interview with our president and founder, Dr. Georgette Bennett, on her new book, Thou Shalt Not Stand Idly By, which chronicles the work that she's been doing as a private citizen with the Multi-Faith Alliance for Syrian Refugees. So many lessons to be learned and executed now in light of what's going on in the world. And we'll also be hosting our Religious Diversity Leadership Summit. So save the date, May 17th and 18th. And on either the 17th or 18th, we will also be having our comedy night, because certainly all of us who do this work know that we have to take a minute to laugh, to kind of keep going. So on behalf of everyone at Tanenbaum, I thank you all for joining. Atiya, Sheryl, thank you all so much. And everyone have a wonderful afternoon. Have a blessed evening, Sheryl. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Atiya, love ya.
Love you. Take care.
Bye, everyone.